Good morning. I'm Dr. Petro, and welcome to the Science of Mind class. We are wandering through the general summary of the science of mind. And we have folks wandering in, which is always really lovely to have people in the building. If you're in DFW, we love to have you here in person, and we love having you online wherever you are watching from. So in the general summary, we are rebuilding our understanding of the theory of the philosophy of metaphysics and the science of mind. We're kind of re-walking through all of that. And we talked about oneness, and we talked about conscious mind, and how we are a part of that. And now we're coming to this fabulous conversation about universal subjectivity, which is a very big word for something that is actually, it's a very powerful understanding of this aspect of universal and the nature of reality. In the science of mind, we call it universal subjectivity. I'm not sure that helps. Not sure the term really helps understand it. But what we're talking about here is the other side of conscious creation, right? The other side of conscious creation is that you begin with the conscious intention, but the conscious intention has to somehow become the manifested form, the outpicturing, the creation. And of course, we know this is happening cosmically, where it's happening at the level of the whole, and it's happening at the level of the individual. It's exactly the same thing. So we have to kind of understand and describe what is the process? What is the way in which this actually works or actually happens? So in the science of mind, we call this universal subjectivity. Now, remember that when we started this conversation, we recognized that mind, all the time that we use mind in metaphysics and in New Thought, it tends to be an old way of expressing what today we might use the word consciousness. So we're going to translate, as we're reading, we're going to translate the word mind into consciousness and see if that doesn't help us actually get a better idea of what we're talking about here. Because the word mind today is a much smaller definition than it had when the metaphysical writers were writing in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. Our language has definitely shifted. So universal subjectivity is consciousness in an abstract, formless state. That is, it is a potential energy and a latent power, which means that it is unformed, but always ready to take form. It is consciousness and substance in an unformed or uncreated state of being. It is ready to become molded into any and all forms. It is unexpressed power, substance, and creativeness. It is unexpressed consciousness. It waits to be called into form or expression. It exists in its original state, invisible but potential, with all possible forms. A creative, universal energy waiting to be used, to be operated upon. Willing, but having no volition of its own. Ready, but having no initiative. Formless, but ready to take form. You can see that it takes a lot of words to describe universal subjectivity. It takes a lot of words. Why? Because it's a very large and complex topic. So we have today something that we didn't have when these metaphysical writers were writing in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, and that is we have a more popular understanding of quantum physics. So if you go to quantum physics, if you are studying the nature of reality through the lens of quantum physics, you have, surprisingly enough, a very similar description. So in quantum physics, we talk about the quantum field, that the quantum field is, in fact, the fabric of reality. It's the fabric of the universe, of the cosmos, out of which everything is made. But it's not yet anything. The quantum field is described both mathematically and philosophically as a field of waves that are potential. And when that potential becomes actualized, the wave form becomes a particle. They don't actually know exactly why it goes from wave to particle. It's called the barrier problem. The barrier problem. What causes this oscillating field that is the underlying something, and realize that this oscillating field is this unformed substance. It is actually this is all actually made out of these waves that have popped into particularity. It's just mind-boggling to think about, right? Right. But this is exactly what the ancient mystics have been saying, what the mystery schools have been teaching, what this paragraph actually says, that there is a potential energy and a latent power which is unformed but ready to take form. And it is actually the substance itself out of which form takes, out of which form is made. So this underlying field, in metaphysics, we call it universal subjectivity. In quantum physics, we call it the quantum field. If you watch The Matrix, they call it the Matrix. If you're a Star Wars fan, it's called the Force, right? It's this intelligence and power that isn't anything yet, and yet it is everywhere present, latent, with the intelligence of how to become whatever it is that causes it to become something, move it out of its latent state into actuality. And it is understanding this piece that gives us the bridge from the intentional creation to, the outward manifestation, the physical form, the cosmos, the universe, the largest creative thing we can think of, or just creations and manifestations that we are having in our own lives. So the way that how should we say this? The impulse of creation becomes creation is through this consciousness and substance. But what do we know about this consciousness and substance? So in the next paragraph, consciousness in its subjective state cannot act until it is set in motion by a consciousness that it is in the conscious state. So this barrier problem in quantum physics, right? The closest that they have come to even beginning to try to see what causes a wave to become a particle, in experimentation, some of you already know this. What do they call it? The observer effect. There's something about the way the experiment itself is set up that causes the underlying quantum field to behave a certain way. Now, there's lots and lots and lots more study that needs to be done about that. But there's something really intriguing about the observer effect. The way the experiment is set up gives some form, some expectation to how this underlying quantum field is going to behave. And so in metaphysics, of course, we understand as above, so below. This is all an outpicturing of what's happening as above, so below. In the absolute reality, the relative reflects it. Well, the other side of the coin is just as true. If we study so below, we can extrapolate as above. If we study the laws of nature, we study the way consciousness works, we study the way we create, we can begin extrapolating, well, what might that mean in terms of how the nature of reality actually functions? And so science is kind of creeping up on what the mystics and the metaphysicians have been talking about all along. And it helps us get like concrete hold of this rather than thinking it's some like mysterious woo-woo or religious or there's, God out there doing it for us, right? It begins to give us some really concrete way of understanding and trying to play with what's actually going on. Now, the truth about all this is we don't turn this on. We don't decide, oh, I'm now going to become creative. I'm now going to pay attention to what's going on. This is happening all the time, whether we're conscious of it or not. What we want to do is actually decide to start engaging with it consciously. So let's see. Universal subjective consciousness is a doer and not a self-conscious knower. It knows how to do, but it does not have any conscious knowledge that it is doing, right? It's simply responsive to the impulse from the physical reality. We might call it the impulse of evolution. In the spiritual realm, we call it the impulse of creation in our own lives. It's the impulse of the desire that we have to express our lives in some powerful and meaningful way, right? There's an impulse, but then that impulse actually acts upon something, moves it in the direction that we want to actualize. Okay, so let me, there's one other thing I want to skip over to page 393, because Ernest Holmes, he kind of meanders around, and you gotta follow the line of logic here. This is the second full paragraph on 393. The invisible essence of subject of consciousness is substance. That is an unformed stuff, an energy. It is energy plus intelligence. Intelligence is conscious energy working upon unformed substance in accordance with law. When we make a demand upon ourselves or upon the universe, which flows through the self, we are making a demand upon this original consciousness and original energy. So the essence of this consciousness, this original subjective consciousness, is the substance. As we said, the field that is in potential but isn't anything yet, hasn't yet actualized in anything. So what causes it to actualize? But the impulse of creation. Otherwise, it would always only stay unformed substance. So the one of the places where we run into this thought, many of us raised in traditional Christian faith or the Jewish faith, right? In the most ancient stories from the Hebrew mystics talking about creation, there's the story about God taking dust, breathing upon it, right? And human beings are created, which is great. But if you think of a God, if the description of God is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, one has to ask the question, well, where the hell did the dust come from? Right? How can there be God and dust? But if we recognize that the impulse, the creative impulse, and the substance out of which it's made is actually the same thing, our best analogy is the quantum field. Do you see? That's why in the science mind, we say all creation is made out of the same consciousness that impelled it, that the energy that it's made out of is the same consciousness that is also the impulse of life itself, the impulse of evolution. And so that brings us back to way back at the beginning of the general summary and way back at the beginning of the science of mind. Everything is one. There's a oneness that is everything, includes everything, not just, oh, we're all one because we're one human family, or, oh, we're all one because there's this one infinite reality out there, and then there's, us in creation down here. No, it's all one. All of it, impulse, law, energy, physicality, all of it, all part of the whole. And so we can actually say that all of this is made out of God stuff, spirit stuff, universal stuff. As the astrophysicists have said, we're all made out of stardust, right? All the elements that we have are all made out of star. It's all the same that the entire universe is made out of. All of that goes under, in the science of mind, the term universal subjectivity. So let's talk for 1 minute about why it's called subjectivity. We don't use the term unconscious or subconscious because that implies that it's somehow not aware or asleep, right? If you think of a person who's unconscious, they're not responding. And if you think of a person, if you think about our subconscious, we think about something that's hidden and that we're not aware of. In the science of mind, we use the word subjective because it's running automatically until or unless there's a new impulse. So it is subject to the impulse, the creative thought, the intention, whether that intention is conscious or unconscious. So rather than using and it's always operating. That would be like saying, well, the law of gravity goes to sleep when I'm not paying attention to it, right? It's nonsense. The law of gravity doesn't go to sleep. The law of gravity is simply always being gravity. You don't have to turn it on. You don't have to turn it off. It's just always there. And it's always there whether we know it or not. And we're using it constantly. Whether we're walking or we're diving off of the diving board, we're always using the law of gravity. So subjectivity is the same kind of principle and energy that we're constantly using, whether we're aware of it or not. So it's subject to the impress that actually takes this unformed substance, this intelligence that isn't anything yet, potential for everything, and gives it a direction, gives it a form, which we are always doing. We don't have to decide to create anything or manifest something. We are actually always creating and manifesting our lives. The question is, are we doing it consciously, intentionally? Are we doing it in alignment with our values, our belief systems? Are we doing it in alignment with our spiritual life and in what we think really will be a contribution to the world and make a positive, powerful impact? Lots of lovely philosophical thoughts for 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. If you're in Central Time, if you're in Pacific Time, it is a whole lot earlier for you. So good. And so, but we want to bend our mind around these things because we do not teach in metaphysics and in the science of mind. We don't teach blind faith. You don't start parroting this because I've said it or some other metaphysical teacher has said it, right? We learn it and then we begin to practice it and apply it. And we learn for ourselves, oh, wow, there's something here. Wow, I might actually not only understand this, but actually be able to work with it. But we can't really work with it until we understand it. So that's why we spend time in the philosophy, the theory of how we understand the nature of reality to work. All right, so this is intended to be interactive. So we'd love to have comments and questions from those of you here in the room or those of you online. So we're going to turn to Ryan and say good morning, and let us say good morning to everybody who's also out there. And he's going to let you know how you can contribute.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm saying that to everybody in the room. You guys can't see me behind all this equipment, and hello to everybody online. My name's Ryan. I'm the host with the most, the handsome voice on the microphone. And to my right is the iconic Richard, who has been our cameraman ever since. Yes, Richard actually started with the dust. He knows the answers to all of this. So for those who are here in the room with us, we invite you to participate by throwing your hands in the air like you just don't care. And me or Richard will hand you one of these microphones. That way people can hear your questions or comments online as well. And then for those who are joining us via Zoom, You can hit the raise your hand icon and I can bring you into the room, or anybody can put inside of the chat their questions or comments and I can bring that in as well. And the same goes true for those who are watching us on Facebook Live. Please feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat and I can bring that in the room as well. And I always like to mention that I keep the chats anonymous. That way we can continue to have a safe space for spiritual growth and development. And I said a whole lot right there. So what is our question today, Petra?
Well, it's really an opportunity to ask or comment on this underlying idea that there is this responsive intelligence and energy, which is also the substance out of which everything is made, that we can understand and begin to use. So what does that, my question really is, how does that land with you? What about that is clear to you and exciting? What about that is, oh, I don't really get it. This is really hard. My brain hurts. Right? And what might you need more to talk about some more? And so, so this is an opportunity to dive a little deeper in it, because I can read you the paragraphs, which is obviously, as you can see, I mean, I could literally read you the whole book. That's how much I love this material, but it's really important for us to digest it. All right, Ryan, so I see that we have a comment or somebody who wants to talk to us.
Yeah, so can I call Dennis into the room? Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Dennis, and just join the conversation?
Yeah, good morning. I guess, okay, as I was reading through this, the mind bend for me here. I mean, I've been practicing science of mind for 10 years, and maybe this is just unique to me. I mean, it's going to sound like kind of lame, but I got a new perspective here. In that first paragraph that you read, and as you said, skip the wordiness. Here's where I highlighted. The universal subjectivity is unexpressed power, substance, and creativeness. It is unexpressed consciousness. Okay, so as I was reading that and highlight, anyway, we're very conscious of watch our words, watch our thoughts, blah, blah, blah. Well, for me, what this did is just, I guess it's just unique to me maybe, but seeing this way, okay, my subjectivity is sitting there waiting for me to do something with it. So the question to me is, what am I going to do with it?
Yes, yes. This is not lame at all, Dennis. Yes, this is what's so important. The universe is waiting for us to now express, to decide, to create, to paint the life of our dreams, to express in a way that no one else, nowhere else in the universe is being expressed, right? And so you say something so important. So often we get into science of mind, we get into metaphysics, and it's like, oh, I have a hidden belief I have to figure out. So my life, sucks because of all these hidden beliefs. So I better figure out what my hidden beliefs are so that, right, my life stops sucking. Okay, great. Not untrue. We might have to do that. Or we get into metaphysics because I want to experience the oneness. I want to experience connection, like I belong. It's really wonderful. And what we don't always realize is that we are the place where the universe is getting to experience and express itself consciously. And it's actually waiting for us to do that. That's how important and necessary each and every one of us is. We are not here just to learn lessons. We are not here just to clear out karma. We are not here to please God. We are not here for any other reason but to express life as fully and completely and uniquely as we ourselves do, right? Because we're one infinite of the infinite. I don't know how else to say that, right? And without our expression, infinity is missing one fraction of itself. And so it always interests me when people say, well, I don't need to manifest anything. So I don't know why we're always focusing on creating something. Well, because we're focusing on it because we are in fact always doing that. The question is, are we doing it consciously or unconsciously? And are we really engaged in expressing as much of our being as we possibly can, giving as much of our contribution? So the universe is expressing through the cosmos universally, but to some extent, it's an automatic process, and we have the sense of, if it's all one, it doesn't actually know that it's doing this because there's nothing to gauge against. This is why we have the relative experience, right? The expression through physicality. That's how the universe experiences all of its potential being actualized. Now, with us as an individual, we're expressing it in an additionally whole new way. I love that you underlined, Dennis. I think this is one of the most significant understandings of metaphysics and the science of mind that most people miss. And when people ask, what is my purpose? That your purpose isn't to be an accountant or a teacher. Your purpose isn't necessarily to save the world or to raise a child, although you may do all of those things. Fundamentally, our purpose is to express life, to express the infinite uniquely as us. That is our fundamental purpose, as fully as we can. And yes, of course, then what we do is we look at the hidden beliefs that are keeping us from expressing, the traumas that hold us back, the cultural things that we have to work with. Sure, we're doing all of that, but we're doing all of that not because we're here to learn lessons, but because we're here to express. And anything that stands in the way, we have to learn about. We have to learn, and we have to heal it, and we have to get over it, and we have to, push through it, and we have to work with our fear. We have to find our courage, all of those things. But all of that is in service to this beautiful statement that the potential is only potential until it's actualized. And you and I, we're a place where the infinite is being actualized. I mean, does that just not change everything about who you think you are? Who you know yourself to be? That's how powerful and necessary you are to the whole. What an amazing thing, right? Not like, oh, I'm so cool, I'm expressing God, look at me, right? Not from an ego point of view, but from a really deep recognition of what it is that we're doing here. Beautiful. Did I see your hand? Were you going to say something? Let's get a microphone for the people online just so that they can hear you.
So what is it about us that all that power is so terrifying that we're afraid to go there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's because, as Don Ruel McGee's, no. Thank you. Yes, I knew it wasn't coming out right. My little dyslexia jumping up right there. There you go. What he says, I'm not even going to try it. What he says is we're domesticated, right? We're domesticated. We're enculturated. We're socialized. Now we need some of that, right? We actually do need to know how to not rip something out of somebody else's hand like a kid in the sandbox. There is some socializing that's actually necessary, or we would never stop at stop signs. But it becomes overdone. And it has become overdone because the most interesting thing, here's my contemplation about this. All of metaphysics and New Thought in the science of mind, we understand that evolution is the outpicturing of consciousness to grow physically an organ in which consciousness can emerge into self-awareness. Okay, so what happens is that as the consciousness has developed over 13.8 billion years, obviously not only on this planet, but what we know about it, this physical form has developed ways in engaging with physicality before, as it was growing to become a house of self-awareness. So now what we have is the nexus between the awakening of self-awareness in a physical, biological vessel that has its own innate understanding and experience of life itself, right? So we have, remember, we have our reptilian brain, our limbic brain, right? All of those things developed as the organ was growing for self-awareness to awaken. And I think that's one of the reasons why, because our reptilian brain and our limbic brain is still trying to keep us safe, right? It's looking around, where's the tiger? Where's the flood? Where's the threat? You know, what do I need to do to take care of myself? The limbic brain is, who are my friends? Who are my peeps? Am I in my tribe? Right? That's what the limbic brain is doing. And the self-aware part of us is saying, oh, there's something so much more going on. But that's a little frightening to that part of us that is still really enmeshed and embedded in the biology that has created this organ. This is how I have worked with exactly your question, Kyle. And that's why we talk about there's an awakening, right? Because we are literally awakening out of the biological impulses and imperatives into a spiritual conscious imperative. And we're clearly, if you look at the world, we are clearly still working that out. We're not just working it out on the individual level, right? We are working that out on the level of humanity. What does that mean? And when we are still in our reptilian and limbic brains, and we're in our egoic brain, which is the frontal cortex, the executive functions, all of that is designed to manage the space-time continuum. And self-awareness pops us into universality. And those two things are, right? That's a little frightening for the part of us that's trying to keep us safe and secure. And so we have to shift the locus of our security into our spiritual truth, which again is a profound shift. And we're all navigating that. That's how I have come to understand that, because I've asked the same question. Why would it be designed this way? Well, because an organ had to be grown, right? Ralph Waldo Emerson says the soul has need of an organ here. Surely should I not assume the post, right? If the soul hadn't need of an organ here, we wouldn't be here. Just as we hear because we have ears because the organ of ears were needed so we could hear. We don't hear because we have an ear. We have an ear because we need to hear. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that's what's been evolving. So that's my long-winded answer to your question. So, you can just see if it makes any sense to you and what you think about that. Thanks, Kyle. Ryan, I'm going to turn back to you. Anything else going on out there?
As you've been talking about this, I realized that my expression is to be the guy who puts an awkward silence into the room until somebody either raises their hands or asks a question.
Oh, we have one over here.
All right.
And please, everybody, say your name.
Hi, I'm Mary Grace. And just as you were talking earlier about gravity and how it's always working, and it just suddenly dawned on me, we struggle so much with, a spiritual practice and building that. And I kind of, it just, and you can maybe help me say this a little bit so it makes a little more sense. But I realize, we're so used to gravity as adults, we forget that when you were an infant, you had to learn how to navigate gravity as well. And we had to practice it. And when we came out of the womb and it was like, wow, now I feel so heavy all of a sudden. What is that about? And then you lift a hand up and you realize now you're moving against something and you get stronger and stronger. Right. Yeah. And you start learning about gravity by trying to work with it instead of just lay there like a lump for the rest of your life. And if your parents continue to coddle you, you don't gain the strength and that. And I kind of realized that's what spiritual practice is just trying to learn those principles practice them until they make more sense and you can navigate them a little bit better or more efficiently, because even though they're always working, you want to work with it instead of against it. And that was a fascinating thing to me. And then I think about the astronauts that go out into space and spend extended amounts of time there, and then they lose their strength. And when they come back to Earth, they have to get back into the practice of working and gaining their strength back with gravity. So that just sort of made some sense to me.
And what a great analogy, right? We did actually have to learn to work with gravity. It's always there, right? And it's the same thing. These principles are always true. It's always there. And the question is, are we really going to engage with it? And how do we want to learn how to walk? Do we want to run? Do we want to jump and skip? And it's a natural thing to want to do all of those things. And so to give ourselves permission to have that same natural willingness to experiment and to practice. And that is exactly, as you say, what our spiritual practices are for, is to help us experiment and practice with these things. This does not mean it's a long, steady uphill climb into nirvana, like that we're never gonna, like it's always gonna work perfectly, right? So I will tell you a story, just really briefly, speaking of gravity. So we took our granddaughter to the Arboretum yesterday. We had 2 days ago. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful outside. It was absolutely stunningly lovely, of course. And so we walked around, and she's almost 2. So she's exploring everything. Everything is a science experiment. So she's discovering rocks and how you can throw them and bark. And so we got to the fountains. We got to the fountains in the women's garden at the Dallas Arboretum. And so I was showing her how she could put her fingers in the fountain, which of course you're not allowed to do. So don't do it because I said, put your fingers in the fountain. That was really fun. She almost tumbled in because it was such a long reach. So we went around to another fountain. She could crouch down, and we were exploring putting your fingers in the fountain in the water and flicking the drops, so that she could see the drops of water and she could see the ripples that they make when they hit the water. She was utterly entranced, right? And so she and I were doing this. And then all of a sudden, I was pointing out some particularly cool ripples. I mean, she was right here, literally right next to me. And what happened? She was so excited at what I was pointing at, she overbalanced and went head first into the water. All I had a hold of was her heel. She was soaking wet from head to toe, right? And I had to kind of fish her out. And she obviously had learned not to open her mouth. She didn't scream underwater. She didn't come up coughing and gasping, which was really great. She kind of went, and then she was like, I'm cold. And she was great. She was great. But that's going to happen, right? As she's experimenting and she's exploring, she's going to overbalance, she'd fall in the water, fall off the tree, whatever, right? And we forget that that's the same thing that's happening in our spiritual practice, that we are experimenting and we're trying things, and we might experiment with manifestation, or we can experiment with experiencing this creative process. We can experiment with experiencing oneness, all of these kinds of things. And it's a practice. It's a practice to learn about, well, what does it look like, feel like? How might I engage with it? Because we all walk differently, we all run differently, right? We all throw a ball differently. And we all have coaches. If you're going to get good at something, whether it's writing or speaking or playing a sport, right? If you really want to do, you get coaches. Well, that's what your spiritual coach is. When somebody is coaching you on meditation, or how to use be careful with your language, or how to do spiritual mind treatment, or how to, right? That's what spiritual coaches do. They're doing exactly the same thing as any other coach is doing. Try this. No, a little bit of that. No, you might not want to do it that way. Try this way, so that you're experimenting and exploring to find the practice or the way that really works for you. And, sometimes you'll see that somebody can be really, really, really good at a sport, and they kind of do it funky because they're doing it in their own way. They've practiced and practiced and practiced until it really begins to be a lived experience. So we want to understand it intellectually, begin to practice it, And it is those two things that become the embodied, where we now are engaged with it on an ongoing basis, and it becomes a natural way of engaging with the world. So we're not so frightened of the light, and we're not so frightened of the creative power and possibility that we all can tap into. All right, we're going to turn to Ryan one last time. Any other comments out there? Anybody else who wants to chat before we close down?
Well, there's been some comments, and if that's okay, I just
Sure.
want to say some of them. One of the comments, and I always love Bobby for helping me with this. So she says, sounds like source describes as whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere. I really like that. It makes your head kind of go, what?
I really love that. They don't know who, they've attributed it to 3 or 4 different people, that beautiful quote, right? But you think about it, the infinite center of this universal subjectivity and these laws is as fully present in you as it is anywhere else. Go ahead.
All right. Looks like we do have one last comment or question. I don't know. It's all a mystery. All right. Shauna, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and join the conversation?
Good morning, Shauna.
Good morning, Dr. Petra. I've really enjoyed this conversation this morning. It's been perfect timing because I'm in the middle of a major creative process in my life where I'm taking large parts of me, and I've planted this huge vision that I feel really called to live and to create. But there's so much of it in the how that's new for me.
Yeah.
And I don't live with the not enough. You're not good enough. My heart is really called to this vision, and I see it so clearly in 3 years from now. But I am living in the state of incompetency in so many things that I have to do to manifest this vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I know God planted, I know the divine has planted this. It's a divine calling. I know that deep in me. But every day I have to deal with my incompetency, and in different ways, right?
Right.
And I think about the other woman who talked about learning to walk with gravity, thinking about my grandchildren. And what I've discovered in this process is I keep leaning into it, is that frequently my mean girl shows up. So frequently when I'm on this learning curve and I'm learning new things, my mean girl will show up because I don't know something. And it's just shocked me that that mean girl shows up and, diminishes the fact that I'm incompetent. And
yeah. So that mean girl is aimed at you, yourself.
myself,
Yeah.
and not,
Okay.
and living in my incompetency that goes with evolving and reaching for this higher Shauna and this
Yeah.
higher self and this higher expression. So much of it involves, huge growth for me. Maybe the biggest amount of growth that I've faced in, 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to express it, but
Yeah.
it's that I guess, what made me realize this morning is it's my amygdala, Shauna, who's afraid of not knowing.
Yes, that's exactly right. Right. I think that you've hit the nail on the head, Shauna. It's the amygdala hijack that is going, wait, you're not going to be safe. You're not going to be secure. What do you think you're doing? Don't go out there. Don't go out there. Don't go out there. Right. And it's also then the egoic self that, especially in adults, we've forgotten how to learn. We have forgotten how awkward it is to learn things and to practice things and to try new things. And so our ego then wants to also keep us safe and secure. So when the amygdala and the ego are in alignment about that, right, that can be a very loud voice and a very strong feeling. And so for me, I completely resonate. I'm sure everybody resonates with that experience and those moments. And so what I want to call forth to you, which is what I do, and I'm looking to see if there is a specific, because I know he uses the term, if there's a specific sentence in here, which I'm not picking up right at the moment, but remember that this universal subjectivity is all intelligence. It's the doer, and it knows how to do. And so for me, when I feel humanly incompetent over and over and over again, I remind myself there is an intelligence that is managing the freaking universe. Okay? Really, it knows how to make black holes, and it knows how to, cause things to grow. And that is the inherent intelligence in the universe. And that intelligence is the intelligence that is also right here. And so what I affirm is there is an intelligence within me that knows how to do that. Whatever it is, that knows how to learn, that knows how to bring it forward. And I use that to shut my mean girl up. What do you mean I don't know? Well, I may not know. I don't even argue with it. I may not know. The I that is the littler I. But the I that I am, there is that within me that does have the intelligence to know how to do this, to figure this out, to walk the path. And so when we're really understanding that truth, then we realize, that's why in the old traditions, in the ancient traditions, they say you don't walk alone, right? Because that intelligence that is the very fabric of life itself is the fabric of your being as well. That helps me when I start feeling that way. And it's great to give it language and to recognize it and to realize that it isn't the truth. So thank you so much for joining us this morning and for sharing your comments and for being here in the room. So we're going to continue on with the general summary. So if you have the book, please do continue to read along with us. We'll see you in the celebration here in 30 minutes. We're in person on Wednesday nights here at 7 o'clock, and we're online again next week. Have a beautiful week. Bye for now.